Recruiting expert Tobias joins me today to discuss the 4 players Gonzaga is targeting in the 2025 recruiting class.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, folks? Happy Friday. Welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to provide news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Well, I'm thrilled to be joined today by Tobias of The Athletic. We're going to discuss Gonzaga's 4 recruiting targets in the 2025 class, the 4 players that we know Mark Few and the Zags have officially offered scholarships to. We're going to close out the show talking a little bit about Dusty Stromer, as well as a conversation about the new era of college athletics and what it means for high school recruiting. And to get to that before we get you out and into the weekend. But Tobias, first of all, thank you so much for making the time to come on the show. Very excited to get a chance to talk about these guys that Gonzaga has been in pursuit of, in some cases for the last couple of years.
Yeah, no problem, man. Thanks for having me on the show.
Of course. So I want to start with the player who's actually the lowest ranked out of the 4 of these players, and that would be Davis Fogle. He's been kind of a hot topic for Gonzaga, particularly lately. The staff has been very invested in bringing him on. He was kind of a player who they had some interest in as much as recently, like 2 months ago, and then he kind of started to get more on their radar. They made him an offer. Now it feels like they're really out and about watching him play, trying to get him. He's coming onto campus at the end of this month to come to Spokane for Hoop Fest. 6'7", kind of guard wing from Anacortes, Washington, little small town on the west side of the state. Rivals just bumped him up to 60th in the 2025 class, but the other recruiting services kind of have him in that 75-80 range. I know you got an opportunity to see him at the Pangos camp. What was your kind of impression of his game and how he looked? He's a guy who hasn't played against a lot of high-level competition, so I'm curious kind of what he looked like in that environment.
He was good. He really, really can score the ball. He's definitely wired to score. He wants to shoot the ball pretty much whenever he touches it, which is I like to see because he has ultimate confidence in himself. But I think that he fits with what Gonzaga likes to do. You know, we're going to talk about him, a couple more players in a couple of minutes, but he would be a nice get for Gonzaga. Like you said, he's gone up to a top 60, 65 player in the country according to Rivals. So I do think that he fits his skill set. He's big, can shoot it, knows how to play. Like to see him get better around the rim, but I think in coach's system, he'd be successful.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit when I had you on Locked On College Basketball and struggles finishing around the rim. I think there's potential for the fact that he grew like 2 to 3 inches in a very short period of time. He's probably still kind of working out some of those size things, but certainly a player who from what I've seen from the video I've watched and everything, like you said, he wants to score when he gets the basketball. He likes to get up and down the court. He's going to play at Compass Prep next year after playing at the 2A level in Washington. That's obviously a huge jump in terms of performance. And I'll tell you right now, I know there are some Gonzaga fans who are maybe a little bit nervous about seeing that, just in the sense of, is he going to be able to kind of step up to that level of competition and play well there? But a guy, I think that if he does play well at that level, we could be talking about him rising in those rankings. And if Gonzaga can secure a commitment before he starts his senior year at Compass Prep, it feels like that could be a really nice win for the Zags and for their staff.
Right, yeah, I agree. And they have some good players there. Robert Moore will be there with him. The House Twins will be there with him. So he'll have good players around him. So it's not like it'll just be him. So he'll learn playing with those players. They have good coaches at AZ Conference. So he'll benefit greatly from that experience.
Next guy that I want to talk about, Tobias, is Nik Khamenia. And Fogle's a guy who's kind of popped relatively recently in terms of being on Gonzaga's radar. And that's the exact opposite for Nik Khamenia. He has been on Gonzaga's radar for a very, very long time. He took an unofficial visit to Spokane for their Craziness in the Kennel event before the 2022-23 season. And then he came back exactly a year later for the Craziness in the Kennel ahead of last season. That was an official visit. The Zags have been on him for a while. They've watched him play down in California at Harvard-Westlake High School. He's been on campus multiple times. We've also seen him rocket up the boards. He was I don't even know if he was a top 100 kid back when Gonzaga first had him on campus. Granted, that was like his freshman year, but now he's top 40 at most places, top 50 everywhere. 6'8", played for Team USA for the FIBA U18s. Like, he's a kid who's really put his name on the map. What are your impressions of his game and kind of knowing what Mark Few and Gonzaga likes to do, how he might fit in that system?
So Khamenia, he's one of my favorite players in that class. I'm a major fan. I saw him in October at the Wooten 150 and at the Border League. He was really good there, really can shoot the ball, like you said, 6'8". And offers are starting to pour in. I think in the last 2 days, he's got a Michigan, Oregon, Purdue offer, and North Carolina offer, I think about a month ago.
Yeah.
So his offers are definitely starting to come in, but he definitely fits. I think that of these group of four, in my opinion, he'd probably be first or second. Like, you got to get this kid. I think that he would be one of the two of this group of four on this list. So I'm definitely a major fan of his.
Yeah, and I think for Gonzaga too, it's not easy to get good guards. Everybody wants good guards, and obviously we're going to talk about two very good guards later. But for Gonzaga in particular, an area where when you look at their best teams historically, they have those versatile 6'7", 6'8", 6'9" kind of wing 3-4 hybrid types, the Julian Strothers, the Corey Kisperts, whomever it may be. And it feels like Khamenia, his combination of size and shooting ability really would be a huge key for Gonzaga, just in terms of wanting a player who adds that kind of versatility. And like you said, far from the only team that is invested here with some other really big name schools. I know UCLA and USC have continued to really try to keep him close to home, and obviously some of those other big programs as well. And for good reason. He's a fantastic player. I personally feel like he'd really fit well in terms of what Gonzaga is trying to do. And we've seen Gonzaga in the past be able to recruit players who they were talking to a year or 18 months or 2 years before a lot of other big name programs were, and that has helped them in the past. So I know a lot of Zags fans have their fingers crossed that that'll work here, because he's no longer choosing between Gonzaga and a few other schools. He's got a whole big list of places that want to bring him onto campus.
And I think he's a kid too. He just fits in most systems, especially but Gonzaga specific. I think that he would be great there. 6'8", shoot the ball. You can play him at that tweener 4-3 spot as well. And I think you put him at the 4, he'll probably be a mismatch problem. I don't know if most forwards will be able to stay in front of him. Yeah. So I think that he's also a kid at times you really don't have to run plays for him. He knows kind of where to be and how to pick his spots appropriately. So he'll be he's a good player. Again, he's one of my favorites in that class.
Well, we talked about it already. The Zags are looking at a couple other guards, top 10 guards in the 2025 class. They've been invested in these guys for a while. We're going to talk about those two players, what their fit would look like in Spokane, whether the Zags have a realistic chance of landing either of them. All of that coming up. Passion, drive, patience, folks. That's the formula for winning championships, and it's also what helps keep your ride or die alive. And eBay Motors has everything that you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. And with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. Plus, with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your car every time, or you get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply, and eBay's Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. All right, folks, segment 2, Stanley Patton, still locked on Zags, still joined here by Tobias Bass of The Athletic, talking about some recruits in the 2025 class that Gonzaga has showed some interest in. We talked about Davis Fogle from Anacortes in the first segment. We talked about Nik Khamenia, longtime target for the Zags at that 3-4 position. Now I want to talk about a pair of guards, both who are in the top 10 of the recruiting class for 2025, who Gonzaga has showed interest in. One of them has been a primary target for Gonzaga for a long time, and that's Isiah Harwell. Number 8 at Rivals right now, number 5 at On3, number 7 at 247, and number 10 at ESPN. He is a consensus top 10 pick, or top 10 recruit, in the 2025 class. 6'6" guard. He's from Pocatello, Idaho. He's got that local connection to Gonzaga. He played at Wasatch Academy in Mount Pleasant, Utah, same high school as Nolan Hickman. Those two guys have a connection. They've gassed each other up on social media in the past. Harwell did come to Gonzaga. He was initially supposed to visit for his official visit in early February for the St. Mary's game. He was unable to come to that game, unfortunately, because he suffered an injury. He did come to Gonzaga 3 weeks later. Fortunately, I guess, for the Zags, they won the game that he showed up to in late February against Santa Clara. They did not win the game against St. Mary's, so he didn't have to come see them lose at the Kennel. He's hurt right now. I think that's a big storyline involving Harwell, but the talent is just so tantalizing. The size, the scoring ability, everything that he brings to the table. What has been your kind of read on Harwell, especially now as he has picked up some offers from some really big name programs?
So he's definitely grown on me. So I've been watching him since he was a freshman, and you've always seen the talent, but the one knock on him was, he's from Idaho. What is the comp level like? Tough enough, those things like that. Well, I think a majority of those questions can pretty much be put to bed now. He's a really, really good player. He's ranked in the top 10 for a reason. He's long, he's athletic, he can really, really score the ball, and his recruitment backs that. I know he's supposed to visit Cal Berkeley, I think, at some point this month. Carolina's recruiting him, and of course Gonzaga. So he's definitely an intriguing prospect long term, and he just gets better each time I see him. So
yeah, feels like a guy. One thing I've noticed about Gonzaga's recruitment lately, and we'll talk about Jalen Haralson in a second as well, but they're not going after 6'1" guards or 6'3" guards. Even Jamari Phillips, who decommitted from Arizona, ended up at Oregon. He's a guy that used to be on Gonzaga's radar, and they didn't really show any interest after he decommitted. And I don't think height's the only reason, but it is kind of an area where we're seeing Gonzaga sort of adapt to like what the modern NBA is doing, where you don't have a lot of guys under 6'3", and Gonzaga's current backcourt is Ryan Nembhard and Nolan Hickman. Both those guys are pretty short, and that's kind of impacted them defensively at times. So I think it's interesting and not a coincidence that the guards that Gonzaga has pursued, including Harwell, are maybe, whether they're capable of playing point guard or not, they're big enough to be a 1 or a 2 and kind of have that size that I think is going to really, it helps them dominate in the WCC, but it helps them against those bigger, longer teams that they face in the NCAA tournament as well.
Yeah.
Jalen Haralson, let's talk about him. Number 7 at Rivals, so one spot ahead of Isiah Harwell. The other service is a little lower on him, but Grant, he's still top 15 everywhere. 15th at On3, 12th at ESPN right now, 11th at 24/7. He is also a 6'6" guard, wing kind of. He's a bit of a 2, a bit of a 3. And while Harwell is pretty deeply connected to Gonzaga in terms of where he lives, in terms of having visited campus, things like that, Jalen Haralson feels like a little bit more of a stretch. He's from Indiana. He is being pursued by schools in Indiana, including Notre Dame, including Purdue. He has also taken a visit to Auburn. He did recently indicate that he would like to come to Spokane and visit. And my theory is anytime, if you can get a kid on campus, if Mark Few can get you on campus, the odds of them landing here are a lot higher. It's always been an area where Gonzaga has really thrived and excelled, but they got to still get him on campus. And with Auburn in the mix, with all these other Indiana schools in the mix, I've always felt like it's a bit of a long shot to land Jalen Haralson, but boy, would he be a great fit for the Zags.
Oh, yeah, and he's big, strong, versatile type of player, kind of like that point forward at the 2-3 spot, plays at his own pace. I think he's averaging like 21 points a game on the Nike EYBL, so he's one of the better guards in the country. I saw him in Indianapolis about a month ago, and he was one of the better players in the gym that day. So but I do agree with you. It does kind of seem like a stretch. I know he's visited Auburn, Purdue, Indiana, and Notre Dame, I believe. But if they can get him on campus, I think you have just as good a shot as any. So that should be the main goal, trying to get him there and show him where he fits, and giving them examples of what they've done with guys like him in the past.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's always the sales point is look at these guys we've put in the NBA. Look at how Andrew Nembhard just picked apart the soon-to-be NBA champion Boston Celtics when he was playing for the Pacers, and Jalen Suggs and all those guys. And certainly Gonzaga is going to have an argument, a selling point. But I think it's hard for a kid who grew up in Indiana, who's watched those teams, to go leave and move halfway across the country to play in a conference that, frankly, is not as good as the conferences that Indiana and Auburn and all of them are in. So it's a tough sell, but certainly a player who I think really fits. And again, it's kind of that archetype that we're seeing Gonzaga pursue more. Like all these guys are between 6'6" and 6'8". They're all kind of positionally versatile. And I think it's a growing area that one thing I've always admired about Mark Few and the Zags, that they seem to always be kind of on the cutting edge of roster construction and building in the college basketball. They were on international recruiting before a lot of other teams were. They were on grad transfers before a lot of other teams were. And I think right now we're starting to see them kind of go for those beefier guard types, because I think it's something that really works in their system. And would love to see Haralson get that opportunity to play for Gonzaga. But yeah, not so sure that he's making that trip out to Spokane. All right. Tobias, we're going to move on and we're going to talk about a player who's currently on Gonzaga's roster, Dusty Stromer, top 50 recruit at his time in high school, was a phenomenal player at Notre Dame High School in California. I want to talk a little bit about the promise that he showed last year and what his role could look like at Gonzaga going forward. And we're going to get to that in just a second. All right, folks, segment 3, still Andy Patton, still locked on Zags, still talking with Tobias Bass of The Athletic. We talked about the 4 players that Gonzaga has made offers to in the 2025 recruiting class: Davis Fogle, Nik Khamenia, Isiah Harwell, and Jalen Haralson. Want to move on now to talk a little bit about Dusty Stromer and then talk a little bit about just the general landscape of high school basketball recruiting in the transfer portal and NIL era and the changes we've seen in that area. But let's start with Dusty. Top 50 recruit in the 2023 class, top 40 at a lot of places, led Notre Dame High School to an incredibly successful season, went 5-0 against Bronny James in his high school career, comes in 2 days before Gonzaga's season starts. He finds out he's going to be a starter because Steele Venters suffers that torn ACL, misses the entire season. And we see Stromer struggle a little bit in the starting role. He wasn't expecting it. It's different playing with the starters and not having the ball in your hands as much. I think he was just kind of adjusting to that new role. Mark Few made what I thought was one of the best decisions of the entire season, which was switching Ben Gregg into the starting lineup, giving Gonzaga some more size and letting Dusty come off the bench. We saw him develop as a three-point shooter. We saw him develop as a player who could drive the ball and dish it effectively. He still has a lot of work, I think, in those areas. But from your time seeing him in high school and kind of your familiarity with Gonzaga's system, like, how do you see this fit? Because I think some people are like, yeah, he only averaged like 5 points a game last year. He didn't look great, but I'm very optimistic about Dusty's future and his fit in the system. But I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
I mean, college basketball is hard, especially as a freshman. Him coming in, playing, he started 15 games, played 23 and a half minutes. That's not bad. Averaging 5, that's not bad at all. I know he was ranked really high, top 50, so people want him to come in there and just be a star. There's different adjustment levels to every situation. I think that for his freshman year, I thought that he was solid. He shot 36% from 3. Again, he started 15 games. So him having to adjust was new for him. But I think that going forward, he'll be a good player with Gonzaga, and he'll be even better this year. He's a really good shooter, has good size, he rebounds well for his position, competes. I think that another year in Few's system, he'll be a much significant better player. But yeah, him coming in there, you have to start. That's a major adjustment. So I think that fans, they got to be patient, especially with the transfer portal era. It's even if you're a top 50 kid, some of them are coming off the bench at whatever school they're going to. So it's definitely an adjustment period that has to be understood.
One of the other things I want to talk about with you, Tobias, is the kind of roster building in the modern era. I'm going to talk about it more generally. I also want to talk about it a little bit from Gonzaga's perspective, because what they're doing this offseason in particular is fascinating to me, in the sense that they are basically building this year's roster and building parts of next year's roster, and they're doing that without high school recruits. Obviously, they are pursuing players in the 2025 class. That's what we've talked about for the majority of the show today, but they also go get a player in Braden Smith who's going to sit next year, and he's going to have 2 years of eligibility after that. They go get a player from Tarleton State and Emmanuel Inocente, who's probably not going to play very many minutes at all this year, but is going to be a bigger piece of their team going forward. And it's kind of this interesting dynamic where you're seeing teams, not just Gonzaga, but other teams that are trying to build multiple years worth of rosters by using the transfer portal as opposed to high school recruiting. And I know part of that was some weaker classes the last couple of years, in part because COVID kind of disrupted some of the high school circuits. And I think that we're still kind of coming out of that period of time. And with so many guys still having that COVID year of eligibility, it's kind of made college basketball trend a little bit older. But do you see this kind of evening out over time? Do you think that we'll see teams start to get back more into high school recruiting? Or do you think this is kind of a reality where a lot of teams are going to build their entire rosters using the transfer portal, and they're not going to focus as much on bringing kids straight out of high school?
I think that you have to be good. I think you have to do both. A school that does a really good job of this is Houston. I mean, a lot of their players, they rarely have guys leave. A lot of these guys, they're homegrown. Marcus Sasser, Jamal Shedd, the guys they've had for 3-4 years, they continually just get better and better and better. You have a rotation. Virginia does the same thing. Many guys don't leave. The players that they get, they're there 3-4 years. So I think that you can bring in portal guys. I think you should probably be doing like a patch job. Hey, we need a big. Let's get one. a 4-man, let's get one. But bringing in 6, 7, 8, 9 guys consistently is just hard. The chemistry's messed up. There's really no continuity. And then you're bringing in top freshmen or just freshmen in general. That is kind of scary because it's like, oh, I'm supposed to come in and do this, but you're bringing in 3 other guys in my position. I don't know if I want to deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that over time it may shift back, but for the near future, I think this is how it's going to be. A lot of schools are going to be hitting the transfer portal. Coaches don't want to wait.
I think one thing we've seen too is freshmen who maybe would have normally ended up at a high major program out of high school are ending up at the mid-major ranks because those programs are instead adding younger transfers or things like that. And we're seeing, from what I'm hearing at least, like mid-major coaches who at some points are willing to have part of their recruiting pitch be, hey, come here, go average 17 points a game, lead us to a conference title and maybe a shot at the big dance, and then go wherever you want. Like then, if you do that, you'll get recruited by the Kentuckys and the Arkansas and the Texases of the world because that's what they're doing. And so like it's fascinating that college coaches are effectively using their ability to have guys come in and leave as a recruiting tool, but it makes sense if you want to get the best players in your program.
And I think too, just the time of it is coaches, they're not having those 5, 6, 7 years of like freedom. The job security is a lot shorter than it has been in the past. They're giving coaches 3, maybe 4 years max before they're kicking them to the curb or on the hot seat. So, if you're a mid-major coach, you have coaches this year, they won like 60, 70% of their game. He got fired.
Yeah.
So it just shows like, hey, dude, come here. Really good with us. We probably can leave together. Yeah. So I might be able to take a step up because the same thing is happening on the high major level. You don't have as much time, to be good. So I think it's a smart. And then if I was a kid, to be honest with you, today, LZ Harrington, he's a top 50 recruit. He went to Harvard today. Like, he's going to go over there. He's going to play a lot. He can have maybe a Malik Mack season, and a year from now or 2, he could leave. So I think if you're a high school kid, I think 1, you probably want to try to get off the board by the holidays, probably around Thanksgiving, and then 2, love loves you. Go where you're going to play. Don't chase all the glitz and glamour. A lot of those, you're just not going to play. So you're going to go there, not play, and end up in the portal and end up somewhere worse than before. So somewhere where you can get some early playing time.
Yeah, I would much rather go Harvard and then make the jump to, Kentucky or Arkansas than start at Kentucky and then drop down and then drop back up. You're just wasting your time. Like it makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely.
Tobias, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show, man. I always appreciate your expertise, your insight into these 2025 kids, certainly love to have you back on when Gonzaga lands some of these kids and we get a sense of when they're going to come on campus. So thanks again for your time.
Oh, last thing too, I think Fogle will be on campus June 26th or the 28th. Yeah. So he'll be. I mean, I don't think the kids will be there, but he'll be there. So he'll be there. Fans, for sure.
Would love it if he left campus would love it if he came to campus and left committed. We'll see if he ends up doing that or not. But a lot of other programs still invested. Tobias, thanks again, folks. That's going to wrap it up for us today and for this week here on the Locked On Zags podcast. We'll be back next week, continuing our season in review series, continuing our conversations about Anton Watson as he gets ready for the NBA draft, conference realignment, all sorts of stuff still going on here on Locked On Zags. And of course, we'll have more recruiting updates for you as well. Thanks again for listening. And until next time, as always, go Zags.